If you look at a world map and zoom in on the tiny Batanes Islands, you might not think much of them, just a scattering of green dots on the northern edge of the Philippines, tucked neatly into the middle of rough seas. To a traveler, they're a paradise. Rolling green hills, stone houses built to survive brutal typhoons, and quiet fishing towns where life moves to the rhythm of the ocean. But to military strategists in Manila, Washington, and yes, even Beijing, those islands are much more than a postcard. They are a gatekeeper, a silent front line that sits right between the Philippines and Taiwan, in one of the most strategically vital waterways in the world, the Luzon Strait. And now the Philippines has just changed the game. On one of these little islands, Mahatao in Bataan, a brand new forward operating base has been activated. What looks like a sleepy province to most is suddenly becoming a launch pad for surveillance, defense, and maybe even deterrence against the rising storm in the Pacific. Think about it, just 120 miles south of Taiwan. These islands are close enough to watch over Chinese naval movements, close enough to support American operations, and close enough to make Beijing nervous. It's no wonder that eyebrows are being raised across the Pacific, because the Philippines just took a place most people overlook and turned it into one of the most strategic pieces of real estate in Asia. This week, the Armed Forces of the Philippines officially inaugurated a forward operating base in Mahatao, on the island of Bataan, part of the northernmost province of Batanes. That might sound like just another routine expansion of military infrastructure on paper, but the reality is far more significant. This base sits in the Luzon Strait, a narrow but strategically vital waterway connecting the South China Sea and the Pacific Ocean. And here's the kicker, it's only about 120 miles south of Taiwan. That's close enough for jets to fly in minutes, for ships to cross in hours, and for radar to keep a watchful eye over one of the tensest flashpoints on Earth. So why now? Why Batanes? Well, let's unpack this. For decades, Batanes has been considered too remote, too exposed, and too vulnerable to host a major Philippine military presence. Locals live simple lives, mostly dependent on farming and fishing, with more concern for typhoons than missiles. But the rise of China's naval power and the growing risk of a Taiwan crisis have changed the equation completely. In Beijing's eyes, Taiwan is a breakaway province destined to return to the mainland, and China hasn't been shy about flexing its military muscle in the Taiwan Strait. For the Philippines, which sits right next door, that's not just a distant geopolitical problem, it's a national security nightmare. By setting up a base in Mahatao, the Philippines is sending two messages at once. First, to its own people. We are defending our frontiers. We are not going to be caught off guard if conflict erupts near Taiwan. And second, to the wider world. We are part of this game now. The Luzon Strait is not just open water, it's defended territory. The Philippine military says the base will serve multiple functions: territorial defense, maritime domain awareness, and humanitarian assistance. That last part is especially important because Batanes is one of the most typhoon-battered regions in the country. But let's be honest, the real significance lies in defense and surveillance. This outpost gives Manila eyes and ears over a critical maritime corridor. It also ensures that if tensions explode around Taiwan, the Philippines won't be blind. Now, here's where things get interesting. Officially, the base was financed by the Armed Forces of the Philippines using national funds. But the timing of its development and the broader context strongly suggest American fingerprints are nearby. The US and the Philippines have recently expanded their Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, granting the US access to more Philippine bases, many of them in northern Luzon, not far from Batanes. Washington has also poured millions into modernizing Philippine facilities, building runways, and upgrading radar. So even if this particular outpost isn't stamped with Made in the USA, it's hard to ignore the bigger picture. The Philippines is rapidly aligning itself with US strategy in the region, and that strategy is crystal clear. Prepare for the possibility of a Taiwan crisis, and make sure China knows it won't get a free pass. For China, this is unwelcome news. Beijing has always viewed the Philippines as part of its strategic backyard, especially with Manila's overlapping claims in the South China Sea. But now, Manila is not just pushing back, it's extending its reach north, directly into the path of Chinese forces that would move toward Taiwan. That makes Batanes more than just an island chain. It becomes a potential tripwire in the event of war. Of course, there are risks. Militarizing Batanes could make it a target. locals have already expressed concern that their once quiet homeland could become ground zero if China lashes out. After all, in the world of military strategy, forward operating bases are both shields and bullseyes. But for Manila, the calculation is clear. It's better to be prepared than defenseless. And let's not forget, the Philippines has a history of being underestimated militarily, only to surprise its adversaries with resilience and clever strategy. The decision to put a base in Batanes may look small on a global scale, but it's part of a much larger chessboard where even the tiniest squares can shift the balance of power. So what's next? With Mahato now operational, we can expect more patrols, more surveillance, and potentially even US-Philippine joint drills nearby. And every time a Chinese ship sails through the Luzon Strait, they'll know they're being watched from Batanes. Batanes is famous across the Philippines for its iconic stone houses, small, sturdy, and built by hand from coral stones and lime. These houses were designed centuries ago to survive the region's brutal weather, where typhoons slam the islands year after year, with winds strong enough to rip roofs off modern homes. But in Batanes, the stone houses stand tall, generation after generation, like living monuments to resilience. And now it's not just those houses that are built to endure. With the new forward operating base in Mahato, the Philippines has essentially created a modern stone house of its own. Only this one is made of radar, runways, and reinforced bunkers. It's a fortress designed not against typhoons of nature, but against the political storms gathering in the Pacific. Think about the symbolism for a second. The Avatan people of Batanes built those stone houses because they understood that survival required strength, preparation, and sacrifice. Today, the Philippine government is following the same principle on a national scale. By placing a base here, they're sending a message. We will not be swept away, no matter how strong the storm. And the storm is very real. The winds of rivalry between the US and China are only getting stronger. Taiwan's future hangs in the balance. And the Luzon Strait, where Batanes sits like a sentinel, is becoming one of the most watched and potentially contested waterways on the planet. So in the end, Batanes' famous stone houses aren't just a cultural landmark. They're a metaphor. They show us that even the smallest, most isolated places can become symbols of strength. And now, with this new military base, Manila has built its own storm shelter, not against rain and wind, but against geopolitics and war. For the Philippines, the lesson is the same as it was for the Avatans centuries ago. Prepare for the storm, stand your ground, and endure. Because in the face of both typhoons and superpowers, survival belongs to those who are ready.